Well, David Katz is a criminal defense attorney and the former assistant U.S. attorney here in Los Angeles in California. David, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
This is all a little bit surreal. On Wednesday, you had a situation that Rudy Giuliani was appearing on a radio show hosted by Donald Trump's other television lawyer, Jay Sekulow. Here's an exchange. Listen to this.
Ultimately, this is the president's decision, but we're hopeful that he will take the advice of his lawyers as this process continues to mature.
Absolutely. I mean, it's his decision, both as an individual and as the president.
Okay, we know that in the past, Giuliani and the other lawyers have said they do not want the president sitting down talking one-on-one with Robert Mueller. The president has said he wants to do it because he thinks he can essentially get in there and, argue his case better than anybody else. So what happens now?
Giuliani himself called this a possible perjury trap. If he has that mindset, and the president's lawyers seem to have that mindset, I still do not believe that this sit-down is ever going to take place. But the president has to appear, especially to his base, to look like a tough guy who's willing to sit down and answer questions. So I think he puts that out through his representatives, but I don't think it's going to happen. And if you want a negotiation to fall apart, obviously one way to do that is to keep asking for things that you know are not going to happen. And it's also not going to happen, I don't think, soon, because there's a rule that you're not supposed to do anything, and Mueller follows this rule within 60 days of the election. So they're about to run out of time right now, and it's August.
Okay, so does that then mean that if the president's team essentially, says no, does Mueller then issue a subpoena?
Well, the president could be subpoenaed. Nixon was subpoenaed for tapes. Clinton was subpoenaed for testimony. The Supreme Court ruled, even a conservative court ruled, that the President Nixon had to comply. They ruled 8-0, and of course that was the beginning of the end of Nixon's presidency.
Okay, so if it does get to this whole subpoena issue, if there is a subpoena issued and it's uncertain what the law is, here's Jay Sekulow again on the time all of this would take legally and the response that is actually set in process should Mueller go this route.
If you get a subpoena, you file what's called a motion to quash. That will be argued at the district court, then it would go to the Court of Appeals, then it would go to the Supreme Court of the United States. A subpoena for live testimony has never been tested in court as to a president of the United States, and there's a lot of language, articles, and precedent against that.
Okay, so ultimately what you could be looking at here is this issue going before the Supreme Court, which is a Supreme Court which potentially has 2 justices on the bench chosen by the president at the center of an issue which they would be deciding. With those 2 justices, I don't know, would they recuse themselves in any capacity? What would happen?
I don't believe that those 2 justices would recuse themselves. I believe that one reason that it may be that they're picking Kavanaugh is precisely because he's written on this subject a law review article saying that the president should not be inconvenienced because of the need for him to attend to his official duties during his presidency. Now, of course, he was on the Starr group that took the exact opposite position and mercilessly hounded, subpoenaed, questioned Clinton and forced Clinton eventually to an impeachment trial. But that's at least what they're saying.
Right. So you have a situation quite possibly that the justice handpicked by the U.S. president will be deciding on the fate of the U.S. president.
Well, this may be a major issue in the confirmation battle over would-be Justice Kavanaugh. But if you take Gorsuch, for instance, Gorsuch, while he was picked and got Merrick Garland's seat, the one that they never had any even hearings about, that was stonewalled completely by the Republicans. But there's no reason why Gorsuch would have to recuse himself. Having said that, there were 8 conservative and moderate justices on the Supreme Court who decided that President Nixon had to comply with the subpoena. So there is hope,
even
with this group.
Different time. Okay, one case which probably will not drag on, it seems. This is Congressman Chris Collins. He's been charged with 7 counts of securities fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, making false statements. He's accused of having insider information about negative clinical trial tests which were carried out by an Australian biotech company. He then found out this information whilst at a picnic at the White House, and it was from the White House that he then called his son Cameron, who had stock in the company. Okay, not only so, if you look at the timeline there, this does seem to be a fairly open and shut case. They don't have wiretaps. They just have the timeline of events.
Well, when I was the head of the Southern California Fraud Task Force here, one of our components was the Securities and Exchange Commission, and I saw some good cases. But this seems to be a slam dunk case.
Right.
Now, his lawyers may be great. They may have a plan to pull a rabbit out of the hat. But it sure looks like a very strong case because it's against the law to tip inside information. Let's assume for a second this one congressman did not sell his own shares, but to tip off, it's a
family member,
it's a family member and another person
friend,
close to him, and for $900,000 in losses to be saved, and the timeline is terrible because it's non-public material information, it's traded upon, and then a day or two later, the public is advised that this trial has not gone well for the MS drug that they're trying to develop, and the stock crashes 92%. It loses 92% of its value. All the other poor suckers were wiped out, but they came out of it okay, didn't they? This congressman's family.
They did indeed. He has denied any wrongdoing, we should say that. He also plans to stay on the ballot for the midterm elections.
Because my focus is to defeat the charges in court, after today, I will not address any issues related to innate immunotherapeutics outside of the courtroom. As I fight to clear my name, rest assured, I will continue to work hard for the people and constituents of the 27th Congressional District of New York, and I will remain on the ballot running for re-election this November. Thank you very much, and have a great night.
Okay, Collins was the first member of Congress to publicly support then-candidate Donald Trump. So, keep that in mind, because this indictment isn't exactly unexpected. The House finding an investigation ultimately concluded there was substantial reason to believe he violated rules, standards of conduct, and potentially federal law. He was a guy, according to the Washington Post, who boasted about making millionaires with his stock tips. And all this was back in October. I mean, we're almost a year on since that House ethics investigation.
Well, I believe this is the same stock that caused such a problem for Price, who had to resign.
Former Health and Human Secretary.
Yes, had to resign as secretary. And just on top of that, it's a situation where, as you say, the House Ethics Committee, which is supposed to be a watchdog, said there was substantial evidence, but they didn't do anything. Only today the Speaker finally asked, or finally removed him from a key committee that he's on. But this is really a startling sequence of events.
There is a trend here, though, within the administration and those close to the administration. Donald Trump promised to drain the swamp, and it's looking more like an infinity pool right now with what's going on. Well,
there sure seem to be a lot of swamp creatures still left in the swamp, and some of them seem to be propagating and proliferating.
Okay. David, we'll leave it at that. Good point to end on. Thank you.
Thank you.